Welcome to this explainer video on how to collect and review data about the resource time used for each stage of the applying for planning permission process. A key benefit of the new planning application related products, particularly Planix and BOPs, is a reduction in the time it takes officers to validate, consult, assess, review and issue decisions about planning applications. The products are designed and iterated to make system interactions simpler at each stage and to reduce the chances of omissions or errors, which can lead to rework. These benefits have already been seen by councils measuring the impact of the new products, and they feed back to the product teams to help continuous improvement. Measuring the time officers spend processing applications using different back office systems can be difficult, but council members of our monitoring and evaluation working group have gained quite a bit of experience. So if you want to hear about that, if you're part of the ODP project for your local planning authority, and you need to understand how to best measure the impact of these new services, then this guide is for you. You may already be familiar with the monitoring and evaluation framework for the apply for planning permission services. If you're not, check out an earlier video in this series, Introduction to Monitoring and Evaluation for the apply for planning permission services. A key benefit of these services is that for the validation, assessment, and review and decision phases, less resource time is needed. First, a point about the difference between elapsed time and resource time. Elapsed time is a measure of how much time passes between two events, for example, submission and decision of an application. Normally, date-time records of events are kept in back-office systems, so analyzing elapsed time data is straightforward. Resource time is a measure of how much actual time staff spend working on a particular task, such as validation or assessment of a planning application. That involves adding up the separate time periods someone may spend on the same task and does not include any breaks. And for this reason, it's much more difficult to measure accurately. Staff carrying out a task may take small breaks during work, toilet breaks, answering questions and calls, or dealing with distractions. They may simply want to avoid the additional time or effort needed to record the time. They may resent the additional effort and not agree that it's worth doing. Recording the time may simply slip their mind. And these records in itself are always based on estimates. Finally, staff may have concerns that this information will be used for performance management based on what they enter. So there are a number of reasons why this is complicated. Let's talk first about what data to collect. For the planning applications pilots, the monitoring and evaluation working group have defined a set of key steps that we ask you to collect and record data for, and they are validation, assessment, review and decision. You'll need to do this for a set of applications processed through the current system and using the current process used to provide a baseline, and also for all applications processed using the new or updated system. We'll talk about how many you need to record later in the video. Here's an example of the type of sheet we will ask you to use. You can see it has rows for each separate application and spaces for the time taken at each step. We'll ask you to submit this sheet on a regular basis, as well as providing summarized results at the end of the test period. ODP engaged councils who've already been involved in resource time data collection have shared with each other what methods they found to be more or less effective in getting accurate data collected. So I'll share these. The first is making sure that managers and officers who will be involved in the test are aware of the potential benefits and have seen and understand how the product is different. Make sure you ask the manager to explain and reassure staff that the data is not going to be used for performance review purposes, and explain there is no good or bad result. This is about finding out what's going on. The data will help everybody improve the system. Secondly, make sure officers involved are familiar with the product and have plenty practice using it, as well as following the processes involved in the test. Hands-on demonstrations are very important, giving real practice at using it and shadowing the first few applications for every officer involved. If you're transferring data and documents from BOPS to your current system, then make sure you include those steps in the briefing and the run-throughs. And again, check the first few done by each staff member to make sure everyone is clear about the process. Provide a way for staff to give feedback. It's important they understand that the product teams are interested in hearing their opinion. Share with staff a summary of the feedback that's already been given and acted on by other councils. And then when you get the feedback, add it to the BOPS pilot feedback tracker sheet and update staff on any plans or releases to act on that feedback. Finally, make sure you keep a regular eye on data quality. Make sure at the time of review and decision that time has been recorded. Perhaps add that to the reviewer's checklist. And if anything's missing, that's the time to ask the officer for an estimate of how long it took. Secondly, carry out a regular data quality review, perhaps weekly, to identify gaps and any outliers, that is, any results which are unusual. Because if they are unusual, take that time to talk to the officer, find out why it was different, and make that note. That will be very valuable going forward. So these are the main tips from councils who've already done this type of data collection. They asked me to emphasize for you that attention to detail right at the start, and in particular making sure the first few applications of each officer are checked to make sure everybody's familiar with the process, are very, very important steps. So data collection tools, what are the options for actually recording that data? Some back office systems have time recording built in. So for baseline data in particular, you might want to take advantage of that. Doncaster do that, for example, for the uniform system. A number of councils have built a Power App, which is a little pop-up window that overlays what's on the officer's desktop, which gives them an opportunity to simply put in the information for each stage. Other councils just use a shared spreadsheet, and some rely on paper and pen, and then the coordinator pulls that information together and stores that on a spreadsheet. A really important thing to understand is how long to run the pilot for. For baseline recording, start recording at least 1 month before starting measuring BOPS. The volume needed by the end of the pilot is likely to be around 50, but this could be less depending on the degree to which your process and results align with data collected by previous councils. If your results and processes are very, very similar to previous councils, then all we need you to do is collect some information to validate that's the case. But if they're different, we'll need more. For test data, using Planix and BOPS and DPR, for example, the typical volume required is 50 to 100 applications. But again, it will depend on your average applications volume and the degree to which your process and results align with data collected by previous councils. Now, councils often follow a staged approach to the volume of test applications. For example, starting by contacting agents to get a controlled number for the first period, while officers become more familiar with the new service and testing process, and test coordinators become more confident. Once that's established, they may then increase volume by reaching out to more agents or providing more visible links to the Planix service on the council website. You can review your volume each month with the M&E group and review in particular the target volumes for you. We ask you to provide the time recording on a standard shared spreadsheet. It's the same data and format that you use for your data quality checks. And that gives the time recorded for each application at each of the 3 stages. It identifies which results are outliers, that is different from most others, and it includes a space for you to add notes about why. We also use this to identify any data gaps. Now, don't worry about gaps or outliers. Include those results. It takes time to get recording methods correct, and there are always unusual cases or times when the data is missing. This sheet then not only provides data for calculation of the final results, it also helps confirm what volume is needed to conclude the time recording task. So collecting this information and sharing it with the M&E group, perhaps at a monthly basis, is really important. Once that's done and you've collected your data and agreed that the collection period has ended, it's time to report. You'll receive access to a shared spreadsheet managed by me or a member of the M&E working group. It's based on the M&E framework and consists of a simple table where you'll input the data for the current incumbent system and the new system. You can see that we want average values and median. That helps aggregate the results across all the pilots run by the councils. Hopefully, this video has given you information that you need to start preparing for your resource time recording. Let's recap. Engage with your planning team manager to get support. Don't forget to mention the benefits that other councils have seen and demonstrate the product. Share experiences of time recording from previous councils doing this and agree the best approach for your council. Make sure that officers who are going to be involved in the test are familiar with the new product and any steps they need to take to copy any documents or data across systems. Run familiarization sessions, have test runs, and monitor the first few applications of every officer involved closely, providing feedback to make sure they are fully familiar with what's needed. Finally, make sure you collect feedback from those officers and provide that to the product teams. If you have any questions or need help at any stage, do reach out to me or any member of the M&E working group. We are all here to support you. Thanks for watching.